Hello and welcome in to the Sportsballers podcast. I'm Corey Puffett, joined as always by Eric Meyer and Evan Ash. It is episode 127, and if you can't tell, I'm in a pretty good mood today because it's also January 20th, and we all know what that means. He gone. But
Yes.
This is a sports podcast, so we're going to focus on that because we no longer have to think so much about politics because we have a sane person in the White House once again. So we've got a lot to talk about today. Obviously, the NFL, we're down to the final four teams vying for the Lombardi Trophy between the Bucks, Packers, and the Bills and the Chiefs. But before we get to the NFL and all of that talk, we have some Major League Baseball news to talk about this week. So we're going to dive into that. A whole lot going on in the East in particular, so we'll get to that in a minute. Let's start with I guess they're in the West, even though they're really in the central of the country. The Houston Astros re-signed Michael Brantley. It looked for a while like he was going to go to the Jays, but instead he's staying with the Astros on a 2-year, $32 million deal. So big for the Astros to get him back. He's been hurt over the past couple of years, so we'll have to see just how big of a re-signing that is. But considering they also lost George Springer to the Jays, it's important that at least they kept one of the two.
Yeah, it's also important that the Blue Jays didn't get all these bats. I just get the sense that there's going to be Orioles Blue Jays games that are going to be 10-9 in the fourth inning. That type of thing.
Meanwhile, so the Jays did sign George Springer, the bigger of the two bats, really, 6-year, $150 million deal, which we'll talk a little bit about that signing and what you guys think of that. But it kind of seems crazy that he's signing for that much, considering I honestly think that DJ LeMahieu is probably the better player between the two, and he's signed for 6 years and $90 million with my Yankees.
Yeah, the Yankees, they got a steal.
Committed highway robbery.
Yeah, I don't know what the other 29 teams are doing. Why don't you want this guy on your team?
Yeah, some people might disagree and say that George Springer is the better player, and I don't watch enough baseball outside the Yankees to have a hard and fast opinion one way or the other. But you can't tell me that George Springer is an extra, what is that, $15 million a year, whatever that is, better. I haven't done the math. It's probably more than $15 million a year, honestly, looking at it. But regardless, that's a pretty big difference. It's an extra $60 million. Yeah, it's a 10. Yeah, $10 million a year. There goes my math again.
Boy.
So,
he's not that much better.
There's a difference, though, because I would say, it's debatable whether George Springer is a better player than DJ LeMahieu. I would say historically he has been over the last 4 or 5 years. If you take that as a sample, he has been. But obviously LeMahieu has been great for the Yankees over the last couple of years. But another factor is the fact that DJ LeMahieu is a lot older than George Springer. Actually, he's not that much older, but he's been around a little longer. I think Springer's got more upside. And also the Yankees got a steal, like we said. LeMahieu was a legit MVP candidate last year, and in the mix the year before, $15 million for him. That's what you pay for like a third guy in your rotation starter. Like, that's a decent third starter for most people, and he's like DJ LeMahieu probably should have been paid something around $20 to $25 million a year, and he probably could have. We talked about this a little bit in the chat. He could have gotten the same total for fewer years and then re-upped at age 35 or 36 and gotten paid again.
Yeah, and still had a little something in the tank.
Yeah, so I don't know how this happened. I'm surprised that LeMahieu's agent didn't strike a better bargain than this, but hey, good for the Yankees, man. They re-signed a huge player for them. I don't know if this makes them a contender. I guess they were already kind of a contender.
Yeah, the Yankees are already contenders. They're kind of perennial contenders.
But they haven't really. They didn't do much last year. Are they better than the Rays now? I don't know. Are they better than?
I mean, not necessarily based on this move, because this doesn't change anything.
Yeah,
This keeps the offense, sort of where it is among other
it's a
signings.
status quo move. Yeah, it maintains what you already had.
We reached deals with all of our arbitration eligible players. We got Judge back for a year at $10 million. We got Urshela back for a year at a little more than $4.5 million. Torres at $4 million. Frazier at $2 million.
It's not like these people were leaving.
No, but we reached those deals. We made sure that they stuck around. We made them happy, and hopefully that that leads to maybe getting something of a hometown discount with some of these players. Sanchez was also on that list, but he was among the players that I just don't care as much about. The big thing that the Yankees have done so far this offseason that has the potential to move us up a little bit is the signing of Corey Kluber, but he's been hurt recently, so it just depends on whether he actually comes back healthy and pitches well. It's one of those things where I'm it's a little bittersweet. On one hand, I want him to do well, but on the other hand, he misspells his name, so I don't really like him that much.
Well, plus you signed Corey Kluber, and you're going to lose Masahiro Tanaka.
Oh yes.
And so while
Tanaka actually played pretty well last year.
Yeah, he's a pretty solid pitcher. I would rather have him than Corey Kluber, given Kluber's current state.
Probably.
Constantly being injured, hasn't pitched well in a while now, and he's old. I mean, he's up there in years at this point. I'm not sure that Kluber's going to make a big contribution. I know a lot of Yankees fans were particularly upset to see the Yankees strike out in their potential trade opportunity for Francisco Lindor, which the Mets pulled down. So that's always going to create a little bit of extra drama there, even though the Mets they got their own issues that we'll get to a little later. But the Yankees, they've made the moves they needed to make, as far as I'm concerned. They're still the same team as they were last year, pretty much, which is certainly good enough to make the playoffs. But we'll see how some of these sort of low risk, potentially high reward signings like Corey Kluber pan out, because I don't think it will, but it's also, who cares? He's not making that much money.
This is the type of signing I wish the Orioles would make. Like, they sign somebody to a 1-year deal or something, and if he does well, we can trade him, and if he does poorly, we can just cut him. I feel like that's a way to help rebuild your team. You can sort of buy prospects in that regard.
Well, the Orioles sort of did that with Andrew Cashner, but they did that in a period where they thought they were still trying to win games. But it turned out to be that way because Cashner was only on like a 2-year deal or something like that. And he wasn't that good, but he was good enough to get the Red Sox to trade for him. So there's something to that.
Away, the guy we traded to the Braves for prospects who was awful last year. What's that guy's name?
We traded Richard Blyer to them.
It wasn't Richard Blyer. It was a starting pitcher who we signed to a minor league deal about a year ago.
Was it that Straley guy or whatever that came from the Marlins? It wasn't him.
No, he was really awful.
Yeah, he was bad. I don't remember who you're talking about.
Oh my goodness, what was it? All right. I'm gonna have to look that up.
So anyway, moving off the Yankees and back to the Jays with that George Springer signing, what do you guys think this means for the Blue Jays? Does this get them up over that, make them solidly the best team in the AL East at this point?
Hell no.
Oh no.
No way.
I mean, is he pitching for them? I don't think so.
Right. The Blue Jays were not just one star player away from being as good as the Yankees or the Rays. I mean, that's not reality. They were looking like a 500 team over the course of a full season, which not bad, but certainly not what we expect the Yankees and the Rays to be. I don't think this makes them a realistic contender. That makes them a slightly better version of a mediocre team. I mean, one player, we've seen it happen all the time. Mike Trout can't make the Angels good. George Springer isn't going to take the Blue Jays from being average to being great. That's just not going to happen.
To be fair, he's not the only good player on that team. I mean, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a really solid player, and we have to expect that he's going to get better, year after year.
We do? We do? Because he looks kind of fat to me.
Vlad Jr., he lost a bunch of weight.
We'll see if it sticks. That's how you eat your way out of the league. I'm a little concerned about him. He hasn't produced. He had a nice home run derby, and it was awesome, but that's all he's really done. I'm not sold on Vlad Jr.
Okay. All Your guys' Orioles re-signed Trey Mancini to a 1-year deal, a little south of $5 million. What do you guys think of that decision to bring him back?
I mean, it was arbitration, so
Yeah, I don't think it's
Oh, okay.
the amount of money.
Do you
is
think
relevant.
that amount makes sense?
I mean,
sure.
all I care about is if he's healthy enough to play or not. The amount of money is irrelevant at this point, and it pales in comparison to whatever Chris Davis is stealing from the.
Yeah,
from the
Chris
Orioles,
Davis still on the
bank
roster?
vault.
Yeah, Chris Davis still has 2 more years left on his deal.
Have fun with that.
But as for Mancini, I mean, this is his first year of being arbitration eligible, so it makes sense that it's a relatively low amount of money for given how good of a player he is. So, but they didn't go to arbitration. That's the point. They settled on this amount, without having to take that step. So
right.
both parties.
Well, that's the same thing that happened with the Yankees.
Effort.
That's the same thing that happened with the Yankees and those players like Judge and Urshela and them.
Yeah, and you generally, for your good young players like Aaron Judge, like Gio Urshela, you don't want to go to arbitration because that pisses the player off. And then, like you mentioned this, Corey, it would probably incentivize them to perhaps consider re-signing with the team or potentially signing an earlier deal like the Mariners did with Kyle Seager, where he still had years of arbitration left, and he signed for a lesser amount per year, but they bought out his arbitration years so that he could get that security. That becomes more amenable to players when they have a good relationship with the organization.
Yeah.
Whereas if you blow them off like the Red Sox did with Mookie Betts, where they fought him in arbitration after he won an MVP, and it's like, are you out of your mind? Give him what he wants.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, they were, and look how it worked out for them. So
well, they have financial flexibility now, so that'll help them win championships.
Excellent. But as for Mancini, like Evan said, he's a good player. An all-star caliber player, but more importantly, what's happened to him, what he's been through that we've discussed on here, fighting colon cancer and things like that, it would be unconscionable for the Orioles to throw away any goodwill with him because he's earned every bit of their respect from a human standpoint. And then when you consider how good he is as a player, it just makes it all the more, a no-brainer.
Absolutely.
So Eric mentioned the Yankees' failed attempt to acquire Francisco Lindor. He ultimately went to the Mets. But the Mets are in the news for other reasons this week after they fired their new general manager, Jared Porter, after a reporter revealed that he sent some inappropriate text messages to a female reporter back in 2016 while he was with the Chicago Cubs. Your guys' take on that?
I mean, this is another no-brainer. Like, it's a gots-to-go situation. They just hired this guy
last month,
December 13th or something.
Yeah, a month and a week ago.
Yeah, I mean, the news and all the stuff going on in the world, it seems like a long time ago, but really, it's only about 40-ish days, and he's already gone because, he sent pictures. He kept badgering this woman about going on a date with him, and she, he couldn't really take the hint that he wasn't interested, and he, basically ruined her career. Sent a picture of a penis to her for some reason. I don't know how that would make her change her mind. It doesn't quite make sense to me, but that was the thing that ended it, I guess.
It doesn't make sense to people that have sense. So, that kind of shows you where this guy's head was at. There's a lot of angles to this that harken back to some other stories that we've discussed, both on here and not on here, regarding men and women, the relationship in the workplace. And this is just so over the top, cartoonishly bad. But let's not lose sight of, aside from the fact that it was so pathetic, it was also very hurtful to this woman who he pursued recklessly, and to the point where she, had to basically blow the whistle on him. And she didn't feel compelled to do it until this point because for her own protection. And that's the way life works in these situations, where somebody that has more power over somebody in terms of where they stand in the industry can lord this over them, even though their behavior is totally reprehensible. And that's where a lot of people's heads have been, why didn't she come forward sooner? It's like, who cares? That's not the point. The point is 100% the dude sent her 65 plus text messages with no response, including lewd photos. That's sexual harassment point blank.
Yep.
And that is beyond the pale of what's okay for sure. And then to continue to do so while you're in a position of power over this person to potentially ruin their livelihood, it's just there's a level of a predatory nature that you can't stand by under any circumstance. And so the Mets ultimately made the right move, especially because apparently Steve Cohen has his own history of being sued for gender discrimination and things like that. He couldn't afford to have this on his hanging around his neck either. This guy had to go.
Yeah, it calls back to mind everything that happened with the Washington football team at the end of the summer leading into the season when we had that big Washington Post story break about the women who have been in part of the team in the past and the sexual harassment that they've dealt with. These are women who want to work in sports. They've pursued this industry throughout their time of studying and their early professional careers, and being a whistleblower has the potential to derail all of that. That's why so many of the women who were quoted and talked to for that report were anonymous sources. It's not because they're not real. It's not because they're fake and made up by the journalists. It's because they still want to work in this industry. They don't want their career to end because of this, and that's unfortunately the reality. That's a risk if you come forward. So good for her for stepping up and saying something, but the more important thing is she needs to be protected. Her interests need to be protected. This cannot be allowed to affect her career. And the sad truth is that even if it doesn't affect her career from the standpoint of people selecting not to hire her because they view her as a risk, she might whistleblow on me, never mind the fact that if you just don't do anything inappropriate, she won't have a reason to whistleblow on you. Hopefully it doesn't even come back in the other thing is it doesn't even have to come back that way. It can be something as quote unquote innocent as a joke or a snide remark in the hallway. Have you gotten any inappropriate text messages lately? Like, that's not okay. And unfortunately, that's also something that she may have to deal with, that she was trying to avoid having to deal with by not saying something sooner, right? Like, there's a plethora of potential reasons for her to wait, to not say anything initially, to choose now to say something. It doesn't matter what those reasons are. They're her reasons.
Yeah, and the thing is, I want to live in a world where if you text a woman 65 times and you send her images of your junk unsolicited,
that you're the one
that
who's
you're
clowned.
unemployable.
Yeah, you're the one who's clowned, not her. You're the one who's unemployable, not her.
And it shouldn't be seen as, you shouldn't be seen as a pariah for calling out such behavior. The person that did it should be the pariah. And like you mentioned, Corey, people side-eyeing this woman potentially saying, what if she snitches on me? Well, if you don't send her 65 unsolicited text messages trying to ask her out on a date, you probably have nothing to worry about. Just act like a normal human being. Stop being so damn entitled to thinking that you can walk all over these people and demand things from them that they don't want to offer. That's not how it works. Grow up.
Yeah, the other interesting thing about this is, it also kind of it's a completely maybe not completely. It is a different situation than with Kareem Hunt, but of a similar ilk, where the Mets fire this guy, but somebody else could go and hire him. And we've seen this sort of thing happen before, where a story like this breaks and and the guy gets fired, and then he lands somewhere else, and it's just kind of forgotten about. Similar to with Kareem Hunt, he hits a woman, he lies about it to the Chiefs, they cut him. he signs eventually with the Browns, and people just don't really talk about it anymore. And I have trouble understanding that. You shouldn't be able to just land on your feet somewhere else and everything's all good just because the team that was your employer at the time cut ties. Like, this guy should not have another job in Major League Baseball. He shouldn't have another job in sports, or anywhere where women can also work, which should be everywhere, honestly.
Yeah, this guy should be done. I mean, this is so over the top. This isn't a small mistake or a lapse in judgment. This was consistent, pervasive behavior. This is who he is. So, I mean, what else can you say but hit the road, Jack? You're not going to be a part of this industry.
Yeah.
And as for Kareem Hunt, we talked a little bit about this offline, about how we were watching the Browns play. I think it was one of the games against the Steelers or somebody like that. It
was one of those two.
And they kept, and Michaels and Collinsworth talked about how here's Kareem Hunt. He led the league in rushing as a rookie with the Chiefs, and then he just kind of ended up in Cleveland. Now he's become part of this backfield. It's like, okay, well,
you skipped a big step.
Yeah, to a casual observer, it doesn't make sense that a guy that led the league in rushing is suddenly a part of a tandem backfield in 2020, 3 years later, unless you explain the fact, he got kicked off the Chiefs because he committed an act of domestic abuse and he lied about it. That is kind of an important detail. And then there was a tweet about how this week the Browns were playing the Chiefs, and somebody tried to paint it as Kareem Hunt's revenge game because the Chiefs, quote-unquote, gave up on him. I'm like, you're leaving a lot of the story out, buddy. The most important part, in fact. So maybe you ought to recalibrate and start from there. Start with the fact that he kicked a woman and then he lied about it.
I can't even think
Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
I can't even think of a metaphor offhand to compare that to, because, like, how ludicrous is that to insinuate that the Chiefs just randomly gave up on one of the best running backs in the NFL? Like, clearly that's not all that happened.
Like, the Chiefs are the ones who made the dumb decision.
Right. Like if that was something that the Chiefs were capable of doing just, for no reason, they would not be in the playoffs right now, let alone in the AFC Championship game for the second year in a row.
Third year in a row.
Third year in a row. Thank you. Yeah. So, that'll kind of
set the third year in a row.
Yeah. So that'll kind of segue us into our NFL discussion. We had 4 divisional round games this past weekend. The Rams and the Packers kicked things off. It's an interesting game there. Aaron Rodgers played really well. The running game showed up. In particular, Jamal Williams had a great game. We'll talk about both of them a little bit with the best and worst according to Football Outsiders quick reads. But what were you guys' takeaways from that game?
I was impressed with the Packers' offense, obviously, because they're going up against such a good defense. I know that Aaron Donald was physically compromised a bit, and it was obvious you could see him laboring a bit. But beyond him, the Rams still had a really good D. And I figured the way that the Packers would win this game, because I obviously picked them to win, was because Jared Goff wouldn't be able to throw the ball with any level of effectiveness. But he did. He was all right. He didn't have a great game or anything like that, but he looked like Jared Goff for the most part. And the Rams were able to score points on the Packers, and yet the Packers were still able to basically run away with the game because Rodgers was so prolific and because they got a great assist from their running game.
Yeah, I mean,
this game was it played out a little bit different. I thought it would be sort of low scoring, like the Rams D would be able to shut down the Packers offense, and then the Rams offense would not be able to do anything with Jared Goff having one good hand that's not his throwing hand. That wasn't right. So, the Rams defense, it was still pretty good, but I sort of discounted Aaron Donald's lack of availability. Even when he was in there, I think the Packers did a pretty good job of keeping him from wrecking the game and causing too much craziness. I thought it would be closer than it was. I thought the Rams defense would hang around, but toward the end, they just seemed like they didn't have anything left.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams have their defense really, it started the year decent, but not great. I mean, you remember they gave up 30-some points to the Bills in Week 3. Granted, the Bills' offense, as it turned out, was pretty prolific offense, but
they also got hosed in that game.
They did.
So did I.
They did have some games along the way that were a little bit rough, but over the last month and a half of the season, the defense really stepped up. Was a big part of them being able to make it into the playoffs. Allowed them to beat the Seahawks, and kind of kept them in this game against a really good Packers offense that just ultimately had a little too much firepower for them to deal with. But kudos to Brandon Staley on having a really good defense this year. He was the defensive coordinator there. So the Packers will move on, and we'll talk about
Brandon Staley to the Rams.
No, I know that's a mistake. Yeah, to the Chargers. So he's going to be the new Chargers head coach, which my initial reaction was, there's another white guy that I hadn't heard of, but he's a white guy that I probably should have heard of, considering he was the defensive coordinator for one of the better defensive units in the league this year. But we'll get.
I mean, he does have some merits.
Yeah, we'll get more into some of the coaching moves later on. Let's go ahead and move into the second game of the divisional round, which was your Ravens, who lost to the Buffalo Bills, Evan. So let's get your thoughts on this game first.
Well, in the first half, everything went wrong on offense for the most part. The wind was blowing in the opposite direction of whichever way it was blowing at a given time. It just would switch back and forth. So so that was a mess. Let's see. The offense couldn't do anything. The defense did play well. I mean, the Bills' high-flying offense was pretty much shut down in the first half.
They were more or less shut down in the game. They only scored 17 points.
Yeah.
7 of them came on a pick six, so really 10 offensive points.
Yeah. But the Ravens on offense just couldn't do anything, and then they got let down by the special teams. Our long snapper, kicker, and punter call themselves the Wolf Pack, and they all screwed up on back-to-back plays, essentially. So, Tucker missed multiple kicks. Call that a double doink if you want. He had Alan Chris on the call. And then, let's see, Morgan Cox, the long snapper, had a false start. I don't know. It seemed like it'd be hard to false start as the snapper, but that happened. And then Sam Cook shanked the punt spectacularly, punted it from over here to over there. And that was it. So, those are some of the plays that swung the game. Lamar could have played better, but so could the offensive line, frankly. DJ Fluker and Tyree Phillips, I mean, they sort of alternated at right tackle. They're both terrible. They're just fat and can't move, particularly Fluker. Like, what are you doing? It's like trying to have an armchair block for you. Like, if you have just a little bit of athleticism, you can get around him pretty easily. He's just big. So, Tyree Phillips, he's a rookie, but he just doesn't seem like he's quite ready for prime time just yet. So it was clear to me that Ronnie Stanley was missed. Had a lot of injuries this year. Obviously, the COVID outbreak. I'm not as disappointed as I was last year. I mean, losing in the playoffs sucks. But losing to a team that's better than you, I mean, that's probably what's going to happen. It just sort of underscores the point of when you are the best team, like last year, and you have the 1 seed, and you don't win. That's much more of a disappointment because it was a golden opportunity gone. Congratulations to the Bills. They're the real deal, as we knew, as we all picked them to win. So good luck to them against Kansas City.
Yeah, you're right. The special teams for the Ravens was surprisingly abysmal. Tucker hitting 2 uprights, 1 each. Didn't hit the crossbar ever, which is nice. Would have been an unfortunate trifecta, but nevertheless, he's been largely considered automatic. And I understand the circumstances with the wind and whatnot played into those misses, but that's such a reliable weapon that the Ravens have had for the last decade, and it just didn't pan out. But I mean, the game obviously turned when Lamar threw the pick six. That was they were in the red zone. They were first or third and goal, I guess, at that point, and driving to potentially tie the game with a touchdown. And instead, they give up a touchdown on that play. That's pretty devastating. And then, of course, he got hurt, and the backup came in, and he didn't fare much better. He had some nice looking throws, but he wasn't going to go out there and win the game for you. I mean, like you said, Evan, like we talked about the Bills' defense kind of rising back to being what we thought they would be during the beginning of the season. We figured the Bills' defense would carry the day for the Bills and help them get to the playoffs, and we figured the offense would just have to be good enough. But then the Bills' defense struggled early, and Josh Allen was great. And then the defense got better, and Josh Allen struggled, and then they kind of came together and were great at the same time, and that time is kind of right now. So it wasn't really a huge surprise that the Bills were able to win this game. I thought the Ravens had a little bit better of a showing. I figured Lamar would have more Lamar-like plays, but Bills' defense is great. You got to give them credit for that. And I think that the Ravens really they've got to do some figuring things out, because their offense right now, they've got this unique talent in Lamar, but that unique talent has some limitations as a passer, and the offense as a whole has serious limitations because of the personnel. I feel like you could get away with some of the things that Lamar's not so great at if you had better guys to throw to. And, of course, the offensive line woes that was seemingly inevitable when Stanley went down and when Marshall Yonder retired. It was not going to be the same. And then you had the snappers or the center snapping the ball over Lamar's head.
Oh, my God.
And we saw that happen during the season as well. We saw it in that Patriots monsoon game where that played a role. So the fact that they never got that straightened out.
Switched centers is what happened after the Patriots game. That center got benched and replaced by this center, who was also snapping the ball to places that aren't where the quarterback is standing.
Yeah, those plays, even if you jump on the ball, you're basically giving up the drive. The drive's over at that point. It's basically like taking 2 sacks on one play because of the yardage that you lose. So that's brutal, and that's something that obviously has to change. You're not going to win too many playoff games where every possession counts, and you only get 10 to 12 a game. And if you're just blowing them by not doing the most fundamental thing of getting the ball from the center to the quarterback, that's absolutely something that's got to change. But I mean, the Ravens still have a good foundation of a team here. They've got a great defense. They've got Lamar Jackson. They just need a few pieces back from injury maybe, and they just need maybe a little bit better of a scheme and some better weapons to throw to, and I think this team will be right back in the mix next year.
Yeah, it's the Ravens are clearly missing some sort of big receiver who can compete for 50-50 balls and get separation consistently.
Yeah, you got to consider Allen Robinson as an option. He's a pending free agent, and we all like Allen Robinson. Corey loves him, but he's a very good player, and he's good at exactly what you just described, Evan. He'll go up and fight for balls. He'll box dudes out to get position and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of what Lamar needs a little bit more of, because asking Lamar Jackson to zip around the field all game with his legs and then drop precise dimes, 30, 40 times a game, and frankly, like, it might just be too much, because, I mean, you can't tell me the dude ain't huffing and puffing a little bit when he's hauling ass like that all game. Sometimes it's nice to be able to just have a guy just throw it to the general vicinity and I will go get it. The Ravens don't have somebody like that. Even Mark Andrews, I mean, honestly, I think Mark Andrews got exposed a little bit this year. He's not that good.
Yeah.
Like, he's not that good of a tight end. He's just opportunistic, playing with a quarterback that needs the tight end more than anybody else because he doesn't have the receiving weapons to throw to.
Yeah, Allen Robinson, or I'm wondering if should have drafted A.J. Brown instead of Marquise Brown, that type of thing. somebody, because I mean, we picked up Des Bryant, who hadn't played in 3 years. He's coming off an Achilles injury. He's what, 33, 34, something like that. Like,
Yeah,
that sounds like desperation.
I love the story because Dez was an awesome player, and he seems like he's become a really interesting individual. He had some petulant moments when he was a player, but as a player, he's history at this point, and I think that it sucks, but it's the reality, and you can't expect him to come in and boost your resume to the point where you can go win a Super Bowl. He's not going to be that big of an impact player at all.
Yeah, so, this is the type of role that Miles Boykin was supposed to play, but he just vanished. So
I don't even know who that guy is.
Oh, well,
I've heard his name.
That's a problem.
I've heard his name, but if you told me who does was it Miles Boykin?
Mm-hmm.
If you asked me what team he played for, I would be like, is that like the Boykin that used to play for the Packers that I picked up in fantasy for a couple weeks? Like, it's not him, but is that really the same guy?
No, Miles Boykin's a rookie.
I didn't think so. So again, that's a problem though. You got to get some name brand dudes in the locker room to complement Lamar. Although I will say, I think that it's unfortunate that Mark Ingram wasn't able to etch out a role. I think he's still got something left in the tank. But J.K. Dobbins is the real deal. Like that guy should be getting 15 to 20 touches a game at least. And if that's not part of the ongoing offensive game plan for the Ravens, then I got some serious questions to ask about who's running the show over there because he's excellent.
And Gus Edwards is really good as well.
Basically.
I think it was really cool for the Ravens. They made the decision to release Mark Ingram earlier this week, and like Eric said, I think that Mark Ingram still has something to offer the NFL. He still has plenty of talent. We saw him make some really good plays this year, but J.K. Dobbins kind of took over that role, rightfully so. Gus Edwards is a lot younger than Mark Ingram, and so it makes more sense to keep him as the number 2 back. So, I'm sure that Mark Ingram really appreciates just, the Ravens decided to cut him loose now so that he has, an early start on free agency and finding a place to land for next season. He can start meeting with some teams and figuring out, what kind of scheme he'd like to join, who he'd like to team up with. The Ravens have always kind of been a classy organization in that way. They definitely look out for their players.
And Mark Ingram is a guy that needs to be looked out for because he's a tremendous dude.
Yes,
he's had a really good career. I mean, he's been in the league since 2011, and I was a little worried about him his first couple years with the Saints because the Saints were such a pass-heavy team, and Ingram couldn't really fit in with that scheme because he hadn't developed skills as a pass catcher yet, and the Saints had Darren Sproles. But eventually he became a guy that you could hand the ball to 20, 25 times a game, and you could throw the ball to him sometimes. He was a reliable receiving back. He was a reliable receiving back last year for Lamar Jackson. I mean, he had a great season last year. It's just that this year he got stuck behind, like you said, Corey, a guy that's got a little less tread on the tire in Gus Bus, and a tremendous rookie in J.K. Dobbins. I mean, that's just a tough backfield to be a part of. He could absolutely go somewhere else and certainly be an RB2, similar to like Latavius Murray is with the Saints. I mean, he could realistically, depending on where he lands, he could be a guy that still gets 15 carries a game.
Yeah.
I mean, we have not seen any proof that he can't play anymore. We've just seen him get stuck behind really tough competition in the backfield.
Yeah.
I will say, though, with Gus Edwards, it's not like he was just younger than Mark Ingram, and that's why Mark Ingram didn't play down the stretch. Gus Edwards also improved a lot from last year.
I mean,
because last year he was just big and could run a little bit and tote the rock, but this year he caught some passes. He had a little bit of wiggle to him. He seemed slimmed down. So he improved as well.
I only bring up the age part for Gus because that's long term thinking, past this year into the off season and future years. That's the reason that Mark Ingram is the guy that is the odd man out instead of Gus Edwards. But yeah, I mean, this year Gus definitely proved his mettle, and he and Mark Ingram kind of split that number 2 role, honestly. They kind of went back and forth there, and you definitely saw Mark Ingram reemerge as the number 2 back at times, and then Gus would take it back. It was really just the hot hand behind J.K. Dobbins. seemed to be kind of the way that John Harbaugh was handling that situation. But at this point, it makes sense to stick with Gus Edwards long term, let Mark Ingram go. But it's good for them to take care of him and give him the opportunity to have the benefit of an entire offseason to find a place to land because, like Eric said, at the very least, he can offer that Latavius Murray type role where, Latavius Murray, was fantastic this year behind Alvin Kamara, much to my chagrin, because I got really frustrated every time Latavius Murray touched the ball. And not even just because it was taking away touches from my fantasy guy, but because Latavius Murray actually has the talent to house it on any given carry. And that's one less touchdown and a whole lot less yards that Alvin Kamara can get from me. So,
the thing is, Latavius is good enough to stay in. Like, normally you see the change of pace back come in for a few plays, and then they get down into the red zone, and they put the good guy back in. But Latavius Murray is good enough to stay in the game and get those red zone touches. Yeah. You can't complain. Kamara scored you 21 touchdowns.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can't really complain, but I still do. I still do.
Problem?
But that one didn't really count.
That's true. It didn't count. But even before they had 15. So stop whining.
Regardless, you look at Latavius Murray, even back to his days in Oakland, that was kind of his MO. He wasn't necessarily the guy who was going to get 4 yards in every carry. He'd certainly have his share of 1 and 2 yard rushes, but he could break one free at any time, and he had plenty of really long touchdown runs. So moving on to Sunday's games, the Browns and the Chiefs. Oh, go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, I want to mention that before we move on, the Ravens also cut another Heisman Trophy winner this week. Robert Griffin III.
Oh, did they? I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, so
interesting.
He was just a good dude to have around. Well,
who was the production? What was the guy's name who came in on Saturday? I forgot his name.
That was, I think, Tyler Huntley.
Yeah, he looks pretty solid. He looks like he could be a legit QB2 behind Lamar, and he has that same kind of play style, it seems like, except if I remember correctly, he actually slid once or twice, which RG3 still has yet to learn how to do.
Well, Lamar can't slide either, right? Like, the game-ending play against the Titans when he broke free, he didn't slide, he just stopped and sat down.
Yeah, but Lamar at least has a little bit of meat on his bones, unlike Huntley or RG3, who have absolutely nothing to cushion the blow with when they get tackled and hit.
Well, plus RG3 wasn't that elusive. He was a straight speed guy, whereas Lamar's got a lot more wiggle to him, when moving laterally and, avoiding those big hits, whereas RG3 would oftentimes just run right into a wall.
Or have the wall chase him down.
Yeah, and then land on him and ruin his career.
Yeah.
Still salty.
So moving on to the Browns and the Chiefs from Sunday. Pretty competitive game there. Browns actually, were within a score. They lost by 5 points, which was well below the line on the game. About half the line. But it came down really to a play that took them down to the end zone. Just made a competitive play, tried to reach the ball across the goal line. It got knocked out before it crossed the goal line, fumbled it through the end zone for a touchback, and that's the rule. And I think the most entertaining thing about that came on Monday on ESPN when Dan Orlovsky is talking about this and kind of complaining about it and saying like that shouldn't be the rule. And I forget the exact point that he, like the thing that he wanted to change about it. Probably something like, you should just get the ball at the 1 or something to that effect. But the best part was when Ryan Clark responded to him. It was like, you of all people should know that the end zone is sacred. It's treated differently. Just calling back to Dan Orlovsky's infamous play where he took the snap, ran along the back line of the end zone trying to find somebody, and then ran out of the back of the end zone for a safety. And Dan Orlovsky was like, you know what else I thought was sacred? Our friendship. I guess I was wrong about that. So that was entertaining.
That was great.
But that's the thing. You have to make that decision. Do you take that risk and reach it out across the goal line and try to make that competitive play and be a hero, or do you play it safe, tuck the ball, make sure you don't fumble it, and live to play another down and give your guys a chance to play for the touchdown on the goal line. It's a tough call. And obviously, as a football player,
it's a tough call.
As a football player, in that moment, your instinct is probably going to be, I'm right here, reach the ball across. There's no guarantee that we're going to get the touchdown from the goal line. But you've got a good team. You've got a good offensive line. You've got two really good running backs. You've got a quarterback who's playing, just about lights out lately. You got, in that situation, when it's that close, I feel like you got to trust your guys to get the job done on the goal line. It's just unfortunate that it worked out that way for the Browns. That was a really competitive game. The Browns were that close to potentially winning it.
Yeah, my mom told me a long time ago, or my mom accused me, I guess, of thinking that all people who disagree with me, I just think they're stupid. And that's probably true. But in this case, if anybody tells me that fumbling the ball through the end zone shouldn't be a turnover, I think that's nonsense.
Honestly, I think that fumbling the ball out
ball
of bounds should probably be a turnover, but I get why it's not until you get to the end zone.
Yeah, the end zone is not the field of play. It is different in the end zone. Like Ryan Clark said, the end zone is sacred. Dan Orlovsky. The end zone is not the field of play. It's a different part of the field.
It's the only place where intentional grounding or holding results in a safety.
Yeah. Fumbling the ball out of the end zone isn't the same as fumbling out of bounds. It's different. So I don't think they should change this rule at all, frankly. I think possession of the ball is first and foremost. You have to possess the ball.
Yeah, which is why, quite honestly, I've personally always felt like if you fumble the ball out of bounds, that should be a turnover. If you can't recover it in the field of play, it should not, I don't think the onus should be on the defense to recover it at that point. You shouldn't have let go of the ball. Fumbling is a no-no. That is a cardinal sin as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, I agree. You should hold on to the ball. That's part of the point.
Yeah, I love it when plays like this happen, especially in big moments, because you get all the people that whine about the rule. And, Corey, I kind of agree with you about potentially just – I'm not saying that I 100% agree with your belief that the ball should go to the defense if it's fumbled out of bounds, on the sidelines. But I would say, why isn't that the rule? It's arbitrary. It's a matter of perspective. It's they decided this rule applies here, doesn't apply here. But it's understandable. And the best way that I heard somebody put it was, you're on the football field. You've got 100 yards between two end zones. That's neutral ground. The end zone is one team's territory. The opposite end zone is the other team's territory. If you fumble the ball in the other team's end zone, that's their territory, their football. That's how it works. You have to carry the ball into the end zone and keep possession of it if you want to have the ball. So honestly, I don't feel any sympathy for plays like this. The rules. The rules are the rules. We have rules about – that's like saying it's not fair to have a field goal be only worth 3 points. Why isn't it worth 4? It is what it is. That's the rule.
Yeah.
There's no rhyme or reason to it. They just decided to make it that way. I mean, come on.
Yeah, we all have to play by the same rules. You're not playing by different rules than I am, so –
The entire purpose of the rule book is not to be, quote-unquote, fair, because that's debatable. It's to give the game structure.
Yes.
Fairness is playing within those rules. That's what fairness is when it comes to sports. The rest of the rules are strictly about structuring the game and giving it a level of watchability and playability. That's why those rules exist. That's why you can't hold, because it'd be horrible. That's why you can't commit pass interference, because that'd be a horrible product. If you just hit the crap out of the receivers before they catch the ball, no passes would get completed and it would suck. So that's why those are the rules. But it wouldn't be unfair if they got rid of the pass interference rule and everybody was just beating the crap out of the receivers. That's the rule. Play within the confines of the rule.
Yep.
And, the thing about Dan Orlovsky, I feel bad thinking this, but every time he's on TV, he's actually a pretty good analyst. I like him a lot. But I'm just this dude's most famous moment in football was quarterbacking an 0-16 team and unintentionally running out of the back of the end zone on a play. how did they put this guy on TV? Like, his interview must have been spectacular because he did not have the resume to be on ESPN, but he's there and he's actually doing pretty well. So I applaud him for that.
Yeah.
I will say, though, Steve McNair, when he was with the Ravens in 2007, did the same thing, actually.
Did he? I mean, he wasn't part of an 0-16 team, though. Like, that play didn't epitomize, his team or that year.
That Ravens team went 5-11, and Billick got fired. So,
yeah, but Steve McNair was an MVP. He
Too.
played in the Super Bowl. He was a borderline Hall of Fame guy.
Spectacular NFL quarterback or anything like that. So
he didn't realize he was out of bounds until he hit his head on the goalpost itself. He's like, oh, like, what is that? Like, oh my God.
Orlovsky took. I watched.
He took a lot of steps. He was still looking to throw.
Looking downfield for 5 or 6 paces before he realized, oh wait, the play is over. And the announcers were hilarious. Orlovsky rolls it, oh, he's out of bounds. And it's just like right away the announcers noticed he's running on the end line. The play is over. It's a safety. And
to be fair, they did play baseball in that stadium too. So maybe he thought he was like running down the third base line or something.
Oh God.
Not quite.
The Bucks and the Saints took care of finishing things off for us in the divisional rounds. Already gave myself a little ceremonial pat on my back for being the only one to get that game right. The Buccaneers avoided the 3-game sweep against the Saints and won that game in New Orleans to advance to the conference championship game. They'll get a chance to host the Super Bowl if they can beat the Packers this coming week. But let's talk about that game first. The Bucks and the Saints, the final score was 30-20. Eric, the Saints are your team, so I'll let you take it away on this one.
This game kind of resembled last year's game in terms of the playoffs against the Vikings. Obviously, the Saints didn't turn the ball over as much in that game, but it was just sluggish play throughout that kept the opponent in it, even though, frankly, the Saints were supposed to be the better team. And a big part of it was, frankly, Drew Brees didn't look 100%. You can't figure he was going to be. He fractured 11 ribs just a few weeks ago. There's no way you can tell me he was fully healed.
Yep,
yeah, I mean, he had. I mean, you can't tell me that guy is fully comfortable throwing the football, throwing the fact that he was already looking a little bit aged over the last couple of years when it came to being able to throw the ball down the field. We've come to find out Michael Thomas was dealing with a very severe ankle injury. It wasn't simply just an ankle sprain that needed a few weeks. He's going to need surgery on that, and he suffered a deltoid injury that's going to require surgery as well. He mostly came back because he didn't want to not be a part of a team potentially in Drew's last year for a Super Bowl run. And, that's admirable, but unfortunately he was far from can't guard Mike. He was very well guarded. It was the first game in his career he was out without a catch. And he looked like he was a guy that was dealing with a bum leg. I mean, that's just the reality of it. He was hurt. And you also have to acknowledge the Bucs defense is pretty good. They've got a good squad. And really all 3 games that the Saints played against them, the offense never really looked great. I know the second one they blew them out and they scored a bunch of points, but even then it was very manufactured. There wasn't a whole lot of, oh, look, the Saints are taking over the game. It was kind of like, oh, yeah, check down, picked up some yards, check down, and it worked great. And the first game was way worse than that. There were some turnovers, some sluggish play. The difference is that this time the Bucs were able to not turn the ball over a bunch of times. Like the Saints were the ones turning the ball over, and that's what turned the tide. Because, the first game, Tom Brady threw 2 interceptions, 1 got returned for a touchdown. And this time, in the second game, he threw 3 picks, I think. And they couldn't get out of neutral offensively. It kind of started the same way for the Bucs this game. Brady was 1 for 6, took a sack, went 3 and out on back-to-back drives. I mean, it was an ugly start for them, and it looked like the Saints were going to do the same thing. And then the turnover started. So, I remember watching even before the floodgates opened and the Bucs got back in the game. I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, this team can't go up to Lambeau and win. I was thinking that the entire time. I was like, if this is the type of team that we're going to send out there, we're going to get the doors blown off of us. We're not going to be able to win that game. So my feeling when they ultimately lost to the Bucs was extreme disappointment, obviously, especially given that it's probably Drew Brees' final game. But there's a sense of inevitability that this was going to happen sooner rather than later. So I'd rather have it happen now than have it end really, really badly, playing up in 30-degree weather in Lambeau at best, with a 42-year-old quarterback that already struggling with health, trying to throw in the cold. It would have been a mess.
Yeah.
Struggling with health. I mean, he's batting 500 in terms of lungs and ribs that are healthy. Like that's not struggling. That's that's lucky to be standing up.
Yeah, that's I don't know how you're playing football right now type of injuries. So and if that's Drew's last game, obviously a fantastic career. We'll talk about that a little bit later on when he actually makes that decision. But it's been a pleasure to watch him for sure.
Yeah. This game, on the Bucs side, my takeaway is on the offense in particular, because I didn't think that the defense necessarily played great. I think they played adequately, but the Saints, gave a lot of plays to the defense. But the Bucs offense looked good. Brady threw the ball well. He didn't have to throw a whole lot. He only threw for about 200 yards. But, he got 2 touchdowns, didn't throw any interceptions, which was an issue in his first 2 games against the Bucs or against the Saints. The offensive line protected him a little bit better. I forget how many sacks they gave up.
Just one.
Yeah, just one. After giving up 3 in each of the first 2 contests between the 2 teams. As far as running, Ronald Jones ran the ball pretty well. Leonard Fournette ran okay, but Leonard Fournette really showed up in the passing game, and that was one of the big things, is that the Bucs have not been effective using passers out of the back or running backs out of the backfield. We all know Ronald Jones has not been the guy out of the backfield to catch passes. Not only does the play calling not conducive to him having success as a receiver out of the backfield, but that's just not his style. But even Leonard Fournette, most of the season, we've seen him not really, be that good out of the backfield catching the ball. That changed this week. He caught 5 balls for 44 yards and a touchdown. If you look at just the running side of things, Ronald Jones, to me, was far and away the better player, and Quick Reads confirms that. But when you add in the receiving aspect, Leonard Fournette played really well this week, and that, I think, was one of the big things that gave them that lift. Cameron Brate showed up. Scott Miller had that one long reception. Didn't really show up outside of that, but that was a big play. But a lot of the big name players, Gronkowski, Antonio Brown's, Mike Evans, were basically non-factors. I mean, Mike Evans had the touchdown catch, but that was his only reception. It was a 3-yarder. It reminded me of early in the season when every catch he had was a 1-yard touchdown catch. That was basically his first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. Right.
Well, regardless of the outcome of the game, Marshawn Lattimore is still Mike Evans' daddy.
Yes, he is.
He made a tremendous play to prevent what would have been a deep touchdown pass early in the game. I mean, the only catch he made on him was a 3-yard slant for a touchdown after the Saints had just turned the ball over. So
yep.
You can't really blame him for that. But I think that the Saints defense played well. I think they played a pretty good game.
Yeah.
They mostly kept the Bucs in check when the Bucs have been playing really well, and the Bucs were starting just about every drive in the second half in Saints territory due to turnovers, and they limited the damage. They kept hopeful for most of the game, but it was just a matter of the offense not being able to get out of neutral. I will say that the only thing that sustained the Saints was the fact that they ran the ball surprisingly well against that Bucs defense. The Bucs were one of the best run defenses in the league, and Alvin Kamara ran very well against them. He had, I think, almost 5 yards a carry or so. I mean, that's a pretty good game, especially given going up against that front, especially because he was not being spelled by Latavius Murray, who was out, and Taysom Hill was not a factor either. He was out with a knee injury.
Yep.
So it was pretty much, him in the backfield along with Ty Montgomery, who is Ty Montgomery, so who cares?
I didn't know he was in the league.
Yeah, I didn't either until like a few weeks back when he was suiting up for the Saints. I'm like, why is this guy in the game? But, beyond that, Kamara was the only offensive player that really showed up for the Saints. Again, partially because of injuries and partially because, frankly, the Bucs defense was good.
Yeah, I mean if
you
look,
this game was the turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, the turnovers were
the Saints would have won
Right.
They can give the ball to the other team the whole time.
Yeah, because if you look at the stats and you eliminate those 4 turnovers, everything else points to the Saints winning this game. The Saints had 20 first downs on 60 offensive plays. The Bucs had 20 first downs on 69 offensive plays. The Bucs only forced 11 third downs, of which the Saints converted 6. The Saints defense forced 17 third downs for the Bucs, of which they converted less than half. So you take those turnovers away, the Saints should win this game. But when you have a -4 turnover differential, you kind of dig your own grave.
Yep, that's what happened. Turning point in the game was when Jared Cook fumbled, coughed the ball up when the Saints were up 7 and moving down the field. That was when I kind of knew this was going to get ugly, because you knew that there's no way in hell Tom Brady was going to wilt in the fourth quarter and give it back to you. You knew he was going to step up at that point. You got to be able to match him, and at that point, the Saints were shot.
Absolutely.
It cost me four confidence points because the Saints just kept coughing it up.
So today, Phillip Rivers officially announced his retirement from the NFL after 17 seasons. Terrific career for him. He's got a football team worth of kids to provide for, but he'll now get a chance to spend more time with them. His next gig is going to be as a high school football coach down in Alabama. But he released a statement today. If you haven't read it, you should. It was actually pretty funny. Thanks to the referees for putting up with all of his whining and complaining, even though he still thinks that he was always right. But he had a really good career. The question, though, is he a Hall of Famer? And to me, I have to say, I don't think so.
What? He was in the league 17 years. Like, he was a good player for a long time.
Yeah, he was a good player for a long time. But was he ever, transcendent?
Peyton Manning's not the standard to get in the Hall of Fame.
No, I'm not saying that Peyton Manning is the standard, but when you've got guys like Peyton Manning and Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, who are kind of part of that same era of quarterback, right? I mean, even forgetting about guys that we have now today, like Patrick Mahomes, who we're assuming as long as he stays healthy is going to end up a Hall of Famer. I mean, I just can't see him falling apart to the point that he wouldn't be, barring injury. But you have to look at the guys that he's around, and do we really think that there should be more than 4 or 5 players from a particular era at one position making it to the Hall of Fame and taking away spots from other positions that also need to be recognized and they're just as deserving? And even if we did go with more than 4, I don't know that Phillip Rivers is necessarily my 5th. I don't think that he, was that dominant a player.
I mean, he wasn't dominant, but he wasn't some bum.
But this is not the Hall of Very Good. Evan, you've said that yourself many times. This is not the Hall of Very Good. If you're not dominant, you shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame.
It's not the Hall of Dominant either.
But dominant should be the minimum. Dominant is less than like what the Hall of Fame should be.
If he sucked, then the Chargers would have gotten rid of him well before they did.
I never said he sucked. I never said he sucked.
You're sitting on here bashing him like, oh, this guy's a bum. He wasn't as
that
good
is
as
not what
Manning.
I said.
So, obviously he doesn't deserve any recognition at all.
All right, well, I guess I'm a Matthew Stafford basher too, because I don't think that he belongs in the Hall of Fame right now either.
Okay, let me.
Teams that weren't relevant.
All right, so this is really tough for me because, I wrote a thing for our blog about how I didn't think Matt Ryan belonged in the Hall of Fame, and I didn't think it was really all that close. But Phillip Rivers is a little bit of a different story. Let me read out some numbers for you, Corey,
Sure.
using Phillip Rivers in his career was top 5 in DVOA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. He led the league in DVOA twice. He was top 10 close to 10 times. I'm not going to count them all out, but he was there pretty much every year that he was in the NFL. So he's had some seasons where he was, by this metric and by adjusted net yards per attempt, the best quarterback in football. I honestly thought that in 2008, he was worthy of winning the MVP award over Peyton Manning. The reason he didn't was because Manning's team won more games. But Rivers, objectively, if you look at any stat, was the best quarterback in football that season. And that includes Drew Brees, who threw for 5,000 yards for the first time in decades. So he had seasons where he was that good. I just feel like those seasons were unappreciated because they didn't make deep playoff runs or anything like that, which wasn't always his fault. So he does have a statistical case to make. He was, quote unquote, dominant for some time. It just wasn't as long as we're used to seeing some of our favorite guys like Drew Brees and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning be. And he's not like Ben Roethlisberger or Eli Manning, where he's got the jewelry to back up, maybe not being that guy. But he's very much on the fence, I think. I think that if he got in, I wouldn't have my feelings hurt over it. I think he's had a very underrated career.
In 2006, the Chargers were the number 1 seed, and they had basically won their divisional playoff game. They got an interception against Brady, but to ice the game. But the defensive back was fooling around, fumbled the ball, and gave the Patriots a first down. And they ended up losing. They went 14-2 that year. And then in 2007, Rivers was in Foxborough this time for the AFC Championship against the Patriots. He was playing on a torn ACL.
Yeah, I mean, he's had, again, a lot of bad luck. He's known for, at least lately, throwing quite a few ill-timed interceptions, which you could absolutely hold against him. But the resume is
Drew Brees about interceptions.
Yeah, I mean, the resume is pretty impressive. I think that he was shorted a little bit by some of whoever votes for All-Pro awards and MVP awards. I think that he got left out of the mix far too often, and that kind of caught up to him. I think it's also worth mentioning the dude never missed a start from the time he took over the Chargers in 2006 after the Chargers moved off of Drew Brees. He played every single game for whatever team he was with for 15 straight years. That's pretty damn amazing, too. I mean, I'm not one to give, Hall of Fame status for guys that just play a lot. But, man,
this sport a lot.
That's pretty tough. And you got to give him a little bit of credit for that, too. I just wanted to point it out. I'm not saying that makes him a Hall of Famer. It's just every year I used to look at his numbers and I'd be like, damn, this dude played every game again? It's like he never missed a snap, apparently even with torn ACLs. And what was really frustrating about that AFC Championship game against the Patriots is that LaDainian Tomlinson was sitting on the sidelines, not playing at all, with a significantly less severe injury than a torn ACL, whereas Rivers is going out there on one leg trying to beat the undefeated Patriots. I mean, it's just, come on, man.
I mean, fair enough. I mean, those are all valid points, but I guess my thought is, and you didn't read out which years those were where he was top 5 and top 10. That's fine, but just looking at the eye test, I don't think that he's been that great since around 2013. He had a pretty good 2018 season, right? Like I'll give him that. The Chargers went 12-4. That was probably one of the years where he was, if not top 5, at least close to top 5 in adjusted net yards.
He was number 3 that year.
He was number 3, so there you go. But beyond that, I can't think off the top of my head of another year where he was, close to being dominant, other than 2013 and prior to that. He might have been slightly above average.
2004.
I said since 2013.
5. Yeah, but he'd already been in the league for 9 years.
Well, he didn't really play 2004 and 2005. His first game, his first starts came in 2016. I think he appeared in maybe 2 games each of those first 2 years.
Yeah, but he had a solid
But
between
yeah, I mean, he
2006
had
and
like,
that was his
six or
eighth
seven.
season.
I
That's
mean,
like
if you're
seven
playing well in the
seasons, I
league
think.
for
Seven
8 years,
seasons
you
through
can go in the Hall of Fame.
2013. I mean, that's in 7 seasons is pretty good, but I mean, he wasn't good in 2013. He had to bounce back in 2013, or he wasn't good in 2012. He had to bounce back in 2013. Um, and if I remember correctly, the Chargers still didn't win 10 games that year. Um, Regardless,
Well, the
we're
Chargers have
talking
their
six or
own
seven
mystique of suck.
6 or 7, really good seasons, good to really good seasons early in his career, and then one, maybe two really good seasons late in his career with just kind of this meh, average to slightly above average span in the middle. I just don't know that that's Hall of Fame to me.
I mean, you 8 or 9 top 5 seasons or elite seasons in the NFL.
That's a lot.
That's pretty damn good.
It
I'd say that's
is,
Hall
but
of Fame
again,
worthy.
like I said, I just don't think that I can take that many quarterbacks from one era and ignore all these other positions that deserve just as much respect and just as much recognition by the Hall of Fame committee. I,
Okay, but
Peyton
part of
Manning
the
clearly
golden era
goes
of
in ahead of
quarterbacking.
Phillip Rivers. Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers all clearly go in ahead of Phillip Rivers.
but we're not talking about first ballot. We're talking about at some point is he going to get into the Hall of Fame and what you get 15 years on the ballot. I don't know how it works for football, but you can't tell me that 10, 15 years down the line, a guy with his resume isn't worthy. I just don't think I agree with that, and I also don't agree with the idea of you can only take so many players from a certain era. Well, sometimes the era is just that good. I mean, are we going to leave Ben Roethlisberger out? Because Philip Rivers has been certainly, as an individual, a better player than Ben Roethlisberger. Are we going to leave Ben out?
Maybe.
I say
Well,
we put
no,
Eli
but
Manning
we're
into
not
it.
though. But we're not though because nobody's going to leave Ben out. So I don't see why
Yeah,
Philip
but
Rivers.
the other thing is you're also not. Your chances are Eli Manning is going to get in off the because of his 2 Super Bowl wins.
And all the
Yeah.
money he made.
Yeah. So if we're putting Eli in, I feel like Rivers certainly has a case because he was way better.
I mean, I hear
They were
you on
traded
that,
for
but
each
again,
other.
I do think that there may not be like a cap that the committee puts on it, but like in an official sense. But I still feel like at some point there's going to be that cap. Like Eli Manning's going to get in. Does he deserve it? Hell no, but he's going to get in because he won 2 Super Bowls and he did it. And it just so happens that both of them came against possibly the greatest quarterback to ever play. So he's going to get in. But I think that might actually end up bumping a player or two who are, in fact, better than him and have a better case, like a Phillip Rivers, like a Ben Roethlisberger, both of whom would go in before Eli Manning every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Well, I talked about this a little bit when I wrote stuff down about Matt Ryan. To me, there's a few ways to get in. Either you got to have the jewelry, which Eli's got, or you got to have the stats, which Rivers has, or you've got to have, or some combination of both, or you have to be somebody that was so freakish and transcendent that you can't describe how great they were. Like Ben. Like Ben doesn't have the best stats. He's got a couple of rings, but the dude was unstoppable at times because of his inability to get sacked. And that type of thing went in that bank for him. But, again, I don't see how Rivers could have been a 2-time MVP and we wouldn't be having this conversation. He maybe should have been. And if he was, he would have been in. But I'm not going to penalize him because other people got that choice wrong.
Fair enough. Down in Houston, last week we talked about Deshaun Watson wanting out. Well, Deshaun Watson really wants out. Some information has come out this week. Adam Schefter reported that he is one unhappy camper and has no plans to be with the Houston Texans anytime soon, if ever. His level of anger with the team has reached a 10, according to one of Watson's own tweets, based on the recent front office moves, the lack of communication the team has had with him regarding those moves. The head coaching position is still vacant right now, but I guess the Texans did finally lead to them, or the Texans finally set up an interview with Eric Bieniemy, who it's amazing that
It's too little, too late.
Yeah, I mean, like he I get that you can't technically hire him yet because he's still in the playoffs with the Chiefs, but the fact that there's only 2 teams left with job openings. One of them is the Texans, who is not exactly an ideal landing spot for any coach right now, and the other is the Eagles.
This job been open the longest?
Yeah, this one's been open the longest. And the other one is the Eagles, who also are not really an ideal landing spot, but also, as far as I know, haven't even reached out to Eric Bieniemy. So that part is kind of crazy. But Deshaun Watson, it seems at this point like it's just a matter of time before he's no longer a Texan. It's just a matter of where he's going to land and how that move is going to come about. The Jets could be a potential landing spot. Washington could try and make a move for him. I don't know what either team really has to offer the Texans. In fact, I don't know how many teams need a quarterback and really have a lot that they can offer the Texans. But, Houston might kind of have their hands tied at this point. When you've got a player who's that good and that well respected and is that committed to not being there, your options are severely limited as an organization.
I mean, the best team I think that he should go to is the 49ers.
If
they had a really good quarterback, they would be unstoppable.
And if their players could stay healthy.
On defense, oh my God. Right? And have a competent coach and general manager in San Francisco. And also, the Texans have proved as well that they don't need a whole lot in return to make the deal.
Well, that was with their old GM. That was with Bill O'Brien. They might need a little bit more to make a deal now.
Oh, okay. So instead of just trading him straight up for Jimmy G, they trade him straight up for Jimmy G and throw in a ham sandwich.
Yeah, there you go. That's more like it.
I mean, I feel like you could justify 25, 26 NFL teams picking up the phone and trying to deal for Deshaun Watson. I mean, we're talking about one of the best players in the league, somebody that I'm sure Corey will be arguing one day should go into the Hall of Fame, and maybe we'll all agree. But he's certainly playing at that level now, and he's young, he's in his prime. He's absolutely a transcendent piece that can change the fortunes of a franchise. Unfortunately, the Texans are so damn bad that he couldn't change their fortunes for long enough for them to not mess it up again, which is what they've done. And so I think that wherever he goes is going to be a lot better for it. He seems to be interested in potentially being traded to the Dolphins, which would be fun. They'd obviously have to send Tua back to the Texans. So I think that's a trade you make 100 times out of 100. But we'll see what happens. I mean, like I said, just about every team should pick up the phone and try to make something happen here. So if the Vikings can do it, I don't know what kind of assets they have, what their pick situation is, what their salary cap situation is. Obviously, they're paying Kirk Cousins pretty well, but he's not making as much per year as Deshaun Watson. But who cares? Because, we're talking about Deshaun Watson here. But I think that if they made a pitch for him, then they absolutely should go for it. I think that the Washington football team, if they can get in the mix, they should go for it. Somebody mentioned the Saints potentially replacing Drew Brees with him. I don't know how the hell they're going to do that because they got $99 million to get rid of before they are allowed to compete in football because of the cap. But, hey, people work their magic all the time. But he definitely deserves better than what he's gotten out of Houston.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Chiefs, you're good. Right? If you're the Seahawks,
sure,
you're good. If you're the Chargers, you might consider just sticking with Justin Herbert after the season he had. If you're, there's a handful of teams who, you're set. But if you're not one of those teams with one of those elite quarterbacks who's still pretty young, right? If you're the Ravens, you're good. Just about everybody else should be picking up that phone, right? I mean, if you're the Titans, make the call. If you can get him, get him. I get that Ryan Tannehill's playing well, but Yeah, and I know there's no way that they're trading him in division. I know.
No.
I get it. He's not going to the Jaguars for the same reason. He's not going to the Colts for the same reason. But
I got a question for you.
But the point is, make the call.
If you were the Jags, would you ship Trevor Lawrence and multiple picks for Deshaun Watson?
Oh yeah. Yes, in a heartbeat. Because it's the same thing. It's the same reason with Tua. Because, Tua still has the potential to be really good. I get that he wasn't that great this year, but one of the reasons that we're kind of down on Tua right now is because the coaching staff seemed to give up on him multiple times, right? They benched him twice only to keep him as a starter. It was this bizarre, wacky situation.
That doesn't righty every week.
Right. That doesn't mean that he's washed. He could still have a fantastic career, but we know what Deshaun Watson is. We don't know yet what Trevor Lawrence is going to be in the NFL. We think he's going to be good, but we don't know. If you're the Bengals, and even if you're the Chargers, you might pick up the phone and make that call. Justin Herbert had a terrific season. Joe Burrow was fantastic before he got hurt, but you don't know for sure what they're going to be long term. You know it's Deshaun Watson, so you might make that call. But when you've got a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who you have absolutely no idea. Burrow and Herbert, at least we've seen them play well at the NFL level. We have not seen Lawrence play against NFL competition yet. I make that call.
I completely agree with you, Corey. I think, Trevor Lawrence, he's supposed to be good in the NFL, but there's a chance he might suck, right? We don't know.
Yeah,
but we know.
I wouldn't bet money on it, but it's a possibility.
Jamarcus Russell was supposed to be good.
Well,
Johnny Manziel was supposed to be good. Ryan Leaf was supposed to be good. Where are they now?
Yeah, and the thing is, the whole purpose of being excited about drafting someone like Trevor Lawrence is that you hope they turn into somebody as good as Deshaun Watson. So you absolutely would much rather have the guarantee versus any number of outcomes you could get with Trevor Lawrence. They range between being a bust, being pretty good, and being terrific.
It's like Peter Griffin taking the mystery box. Deshaun Watson is Deshaun Watson, but this draft pick could be anything. It could even be Deshaun Watson.
Yes, that's a classic Family Guy joke that applies here. Yeah, it's like the chances of him being better than Deshaun Watson are very, very slim. Like, you're just hoping he's as good. If you're hoping for better, you're being greedy.
Yep. I just think it's like the friend zone. Imagine being told, I wish I had somebody as good as you. I'm like, well, I'm right here. Hello. Make the deal. You want a quarterback as good as Deshaun Watson? Go get him. He's available.
There you go. So you got some coaching moves to discuss here briefly. The Eagles and Texans jobs, as I mentioned, are still open, but 5 other vacancies have now been filled. I mentioned Brandon Staley to the Chargers. He was the Rams defensive coordinator. They had a terrific season this year. Robert Saleh is now the Jets head coach. He's the first Muslim head coach in the NFL. He was the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. 49ers players all took to social media after that hiring to praise the move. He seems like a really good guy. Seems like a really good coach. I'm cautiously optimistic just because we've seen some guys go to the Jets who we thought could be good. Adam Gase, none of us really thought was going to be good. But Todd Bowles, we all thought might be a decent coach, and that didn't pan out. And it's still hard to tell whether that's because of Todd Bowles or whether that's because of the Jets. Hopefully, Saleh finds success with the Jets. And then you've got Urban Meyer to the Jaguars. This was kind of a situation a lot like the Raiders had when they got rid of Del Rio, and before they'd even fired him, they'd pretty much hired John Gruden as their next head coach. Rooney Rule be damned. We'll bring in a couple people in for some faux interviews, but we've got our guy.
They didn't call me.
Yeah,
they could have called me.
They may as well have. That's basically what the Jaguars did. They brought in Eric Bieniemy and they brought in Raheem Morris for interviews.
Why would you waste those guys' time?
But it turned out that those interviews were shams. They already had their guy in Urban Meyer, who has no NFL coaching experience.
Neither do I.
And has made his living off the backs of unpaid players.
Well, I haven't done that, so.
I mean, I mean, okay, but I'm not saying that it's right that they shafted Raheem Morris and Eric Bieniemy like that. That's obviously not what the Rooney Rule is about. But Urban Meyer's a good hire. I don't care what anybody says. That he's worthy of a shot in the NFL. He is a very good offensive coach. Coaches a pro style offense. He made Dwayne Haskins look like he could play at this level. So take that
is
for what you
saying
will.
something.
That's quite an accomplishment. So I don't think that he's going to have any issues. At least coaching up Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence is in good hands with him. The question is all the other baggage that comes with Urban Meyer that we saw at Florida and later on at Ohio State. And, how combustible is that situation with him being there, given his previous record with, seemingly skipping out on his teams when things aren't going well and all of a sudden health issues crop up and he needs to retire again. But if he's coaching the team, then he's probably going to do a pretty good job. But I don't understand some of these hirings. We see this like with the Rams defensive coordinator getting hired. I know that he's done pretty well for the Rams and people speak well of him. He's been coaching in the NFL for 4 years. He's already getting a head job opportunity.
Coaching in the NFL, like altogether
in the league, yes.
Just being an assistant to the assistant of the assistant to now he's a head guy.
Yes. 4 years. 4. Not 10,
Wow.
Not 20 like a lot of people. 4. So what does it take to get an opportunity like that for somebody like Eric Bieniemy, who's been doing it a lot longer than that and has a much more impressive resume?
He's also got the same qualification that Cliff Kingsbury had. He coached Patrick Mahomes one time.
Yeah, and he actually, won games and a Super Bowl doing so, whereas Cliff Kingsbury didn't do anything resembling that at the college level. So the
Super Bowl in college.
Yeah, but you could win something, and he didn't do that. So I just don't understand why there's always an excuse. There's always some reason to hunt down for why Eric Bieniemy secretly isn't a good coach, whereas we bend over backwards to hire anybody that shared airspace with Sean McVay. I don't understand that because, frankly, Sean McVay is a good coach, but is he a great coach? No, he's not. Not at this point. He hasn't proven that, in my opinion. Like he certainly deserves his shot. He's one of the better coaches in the NFL.
He led his team to the Super Bowl.
No,
they got completely unpantsed.
Yes, they did, but he got them there.
Also had a little bit of an assist from the guys in the stripes, but that's neither here nor there. But I think that a lot of times Sean McVay gets out coached, and that's okay because every coach gets out coached sometimes. Even Bill Belichick has it happen occasionally. But this idea, like Zach Taylor got the Bengals job. I never heard of that guy in my life. Has he proven that he's worthy of an NFL job? No. He hasn't done anything with the Bengals yet. It's only been 2 years, sure. But the team wasn't even looking like they were going to be remotely competitive with Joe Burrow healthy. Why is that guy employed versus other options? I don't – it's beyond – and people who say stuff like, oh, well, you're just assuming it's because of race. I'm like, well, that's because that assumption is valid.
It's not an assumption. We know this.
It's based 100% on empirical evidence. This is how it goes.
Doctor, we notice.
Yeah.
We notice.
Like people say something like, oh, they're just trying to get the best guy. It's like, well, why is the best guy always white? And then the best guy also has limited experience, always white, usually gets fired eventually, and then rehired by somebody else. It's nonsensical to me that this continues to happen, and we continue to discuss it, and people play dumb like this isn't what's going on.
No.
I mean, it's just so obvious. I mean, it's black and white, if you will. Like, it seems. Why in the world would the Lions hire Dan Campbell? And it says on our list here, he got a 6-year deal.
Yeah, I made sure to point that out because that's ridiculous.
What?
This guy has not.
Nobody gets a 6-year deal.
You might be asking, well, was he, a coordinator for the Saints? Because the Saints have really, they're pretty good on offense. Maybe that's what it is. No, he's the tight ends coach.
The tight ends coach. So they basically hired Freddie Kitchens.
He served as the interim head coach. He served as the interim head coach of the Dolphins in 2015 after they fired Joe Philbin, who was another unqualified white guy that got hired. And, you know,
They hired Adam Gase.
Yeah. Look at the last decade of Dolphins coaches and tell me, when does it suddenly get good? But right, when they hire the black guy.
Right, and the thing is, you know, Adam Gase, when he first was hired, like, it sort of made sense. You know, he had been an offensive coordinator for a team that had a successful offense. Now, once you kind of unpacked that and you thought about, well, you know, it was Peyton Manning's offense, you know, it's like, okay, so maybe it makes a little bit less sense, but he was still around greatness, you know, maybe. And then he sucked in Miami, gets fired, but somehow he gets another shot. Like, that's the part that really blows my mind. I get giving him the initial chance, but once it's proven that he's terrible, why does he get another one?
Dude, so many players for the Dolphins under Adam Gase have become either stars or borderline stars since he got fired.
Yeah.
And they went to a new spot. Kenyon Drake was a random dude, and now he's got like 1,000-yard rushing seasons. Devontae Parker was a bust, and now he's considered a legit number one receiver.
Right.
Ryan Tannehill was relegated to backup duty, and now he's a Pro Bowler. Yeah, he got put behind a backup.
Yep.
He's a backup to a backup.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, now he's had 2 straight top 5 NFL seasons. Like, what?
Leading his team to the playoffs.
Unbelievable. And yet the Jets were like, let's go get that guy. Let's do that.
So anyway,
that'll be fun.
He turned Le'Veon Bell into a bum.
Robbie Anderson.
Back to Dan Campbell. That's really the topic at hand. The Saints tight end coach is now the head coach of the Lions to replace Matt Patricia, another guy who, you know, wasn't really qualified, but at least, you know, it sort of made sense to give him a chance. He was the defensive coordinator for the Patriots, even though, you know, we all know that it's not the coordinators who make the defense, it's Bill Belichick. And we also know that Bill Belichick's coaching tree is not exactly chock full of success stories in the NFL. Quite the opposite, in fact. But, so yeah, Dan Campbell is going to be the Lions head coach, and they signed him to a 6-year deal. How, what do we want to put the over under as far as how many of those 6 years he makes it through? I'll put the over under at 2.5.
Under.
Evan is taking the under for 2.5. Eric?
I'm going to take the over just because that's such a huge financial commitment to sit there and say, hey, we're going to cut a guy loose and still have to pay him for 4 years. Plus, he's white. White guys don't get fired early. They get fired too late.
Didn't Patricia get fired early? He was only 2.5 years, right?
That's too long.
Yeah, we knew.
I mean, that's true.
He was already bad. We knew this.
You could have justified firing him after the first season.
Yep, absolutely. The last hiring to talk about is for your hometown Atlanta Falcons, Evan. Not your team, but your hometown now, currently.
Hometown. Where he resides.
Arthur Smith, not to be confused with Arthur Guitar Boogie Smith. Eric, you probably know him for dueling banjos in Deliverance. You're a cinephile, so you probably recognize that at least.
Cinephile gives me a little too much credit, but yes, I do know the scene.
We lost.
Yeah, so not to be confused with him. Arthur Smith.
Have anything to do with football? I thought we were talking about football.
Arthur Smith is the former now offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans, right? So, you know, they've been pretty good the last couple seasons. Revitalized Ryan Tannehill's career, as we just mentioned. Derrick Henry has been great there. You know, the interesting thing though is going to the Falcons. They don't really have a strong running game. Todd Gurley, you know, he's still got a little bit of straight line speed, but we saw this year he can't cut anymore. He doesn't have that elusiveness that made him what he was in Los Angeles. You know, he's not as agile. He can't make people miss. All he's got is, you know, if a hole opens up in front of him, he's got a little bit of that straight line burst left in the tank. That's it. Ito Smith is a bum. Brian Hill is a bum. they don't have a running game. So how much success can they really have offensively when they don't have running backs that can, even give you a modicum of the success that you had with Derrick Henry, and you have an aging quarterback who right now is not nearly as good as the quarterback you're leaving?
Well, the Falcons' issue is on defense. It's been that for, I don't know, about 70 years at this point.
Yeah, so it makes perfect sense to get rid of a defensive coach and replace him with an offensive coach.
Well, that's why they brought in Dan Quinn to help to fix the defense, and he did for a while.
Yeah.
1 year the defense was aight. They went to the Super Bowl. So, that's what happened. And then the defense kind of let it fall apart a little bit down the stretch, in addition to the offense in that game. But, the Falcons' issue is defense. It's defense, defense, defense. I think who the running back is pretty much irrelevant. Their offensive line isn't very good either. They've been spending a lot of draft capital on offensive line lately. See if that turns into something. But it's the defense. They draft people like Vic Beasley and Tack McKinley to be pass rushers, and they don't do that. They just collect big checks and, get their name heard. But that's it. So he's the offensive guy. He's got to fix the defense. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully hopefully for the Falcons anyway, he's like Brian Billick, the offensive genius, who's the head coach of a brilliant defense.
The Falcons' offense ranked 21st in DVOA this year. They're 13th in passing and 29th in rush DVOA. So pretty average passing attack. Matt Ryan's declining. Terrible running attack. So, yeah, everything Corey said is very much on point. You're going from a good quarterback who's emerged under you to a quarterback who used to be good but is starting to show his age a little bit. Something about Arthur Smith I didn't realize. He's the son of Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx. So there was and Arthur Smith is one of these cases where nepotism worked out, like with Kyle Shanahan, where it's like he's actually a good coach, but he got his foot in the door because he was Fred Smith's son. His first opportunity as a coach was with the team that Fred Smith was a part owner of. So, I mean, clearly that's what was going on there. But again, he made it work for him. He's clearly worthy of being an NFL offensive coordinator. We'll see if he's worthy of being a head coach. He's got a tough gig ahead of him, though, because, like we said, that's an aging roster to some extent. Julio Jones is getting up there in age as well. He's becoming more and more injury-prone, less reliable for 16 games. Like I said, Matt Ryan has become a bit of a statue in the pocket. He doesn't handle the blitz well anymore. And of course, he's always been blessed with very good weapons and a strong O-line. The O-line's gotten a little worse, and the weapons have gotten a little less reliable. And so Matt Ryan has turned from good to average, and that's not good enough, especially when your defense is no good. I don't see how Arthur Smith is going to have an easy time turning the team around as a whole unless they have just an absolute, score with the draft and are able to find a whole bunch of talent that nobody expected them to get, kind of like the Saints did in 2017, where they just every pick they had hit, and it worked for a few years before they had to pay the piper.
I mean, he's got a real. I mean, they've got to sell seats in that stadium. That stadium is beautiful, but there's so many seats available. In the event that the pandemic ever ends, and thanks to the events of today, it might.
The chances certainly went up.
Yeah. You can actually go to stadiums and not worry about catching a deadly virus.
That would be nice.
People don't go to those games. The team isn't relevant. It just, you could just show up and get a ticket.
Yeah, there were plenty of times when they're still at the Georgia Dome, but I can't imagine it's a whole lot different at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where the Saints fans would go in there and kind of take over the stadium a little bit. Because they would travel to Atlanta and they would, fill it up, and there wouldn't be enough Falcons fans, and it was. I didn't feel bad about that. I thought that was fun. So
when I was there, when the Ravens came here, it was about 1/3 Ravens fans, 1/3 Falcons fans, and 1/3 empty seats.
And you wouldn't expect the Ravens to have that kind of,
Exactly.
showing in the South. Like,
Right. There's a bunch of Saints fans that live here.
Yeah, Saints makes sense. People from Louisiana populate across the Sun Belt down there. That adds up. Baltimore, not really. That's a mid-Atlantic town.
Yep.
Yeah. And, when the Steelers come here in 2022, my God, it's going to be nothing but Steelers fans.
I have a lot of trauma with what happens at FedEx Field when the Steelers come to play Washington. It's a terrible towel show, and it's always embarrassing. Yeah. And they always put it on national TV. They never just schedule at 1 o'clock Eastern, just play it then. No, it's always a Monday Night Football game where I had to go into work or school the next day and have everybody make fun of me because my team couldn't even fill up the stadium against the Steelers. It's like, yeah.
Quick roundup of the best and worst of the divisional round according to Football Outsiders. Aaron Rodgers was the best quarterback. There were 10 quarterbacks in all who had enough passes to qualify for their list. Drew Brees was the worst of them. Lamar Jackson was 9th on that list. So rough showings for both of them in their losses.
Spoiler alert, the Ravens make plenty of appearances in the worst column.
Yes, they do. Make 75% of them. So the best running back by total DYAR, as I mentioned, was Leonard Fournette. I talked about it earlier. He wasn't really that effective rushing. He was certainly less effective than his teammate Ronald Jones. But when you factor in the receiving, the fact that he had 8 receptions and he had a touchdown, that bumped him up to the top. Nick Chubb was the worst running back by total DYAR. Counting just rushing, Jamal Williams was the best. Gus Edwards was the worst. There's your second Raven, Evan. And then at the wide receiver tight end position, Traquan Smith was the best wide receiver of the week. And your tight end, Mark Andrews, brought up the rear. So just an all-around rough showing for the Ravens offense.
I don't know how he would have ranked in terms of DYAR based on volume, but I know who the highest DVOA quarterback of the week was, and it was Jameis Winston. 1 for 1, 56 yards and a tutter. That's why Traquan Smith was so high up on the receiving list, too, is because he caught that touchdown pass.
Real quick, Eric, before we move into our confidence points and picks for the conference championships, let's just say Drew Brees does officially retire in the coming days. Who's the quarterback next year if you can't get a guy like Deshaun Watson? Is it Winston or is it Hill?
Oh, between those two, I'd much rather have it be Jameis Winston.
Who do you think he will be, though?
Who's it going to be?
Oh, who's it going to be?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, Jameis only signed a 1-year deal, so they would have to bring him back. So, and like I said, with their cap situation, they got a lot of work to do before they could even consider signing somebody like that. And if Jameis is going to be signed as a starter, he's going to want more money than what he was being paid. So, I still think it's going to be Jameis. I think that the Taysom Hill experiment as the starting quarterback, I don't mind having him on the roster doing what he normally does, but I think he proved as the starter that's just he's not capable of handling that as a passer.
I thought he was pretty good. Like the biggest issue I saw was his fumbling, which was also an issue for Lamar Jackson in his rookie and even a little bit in his second year. Not to the same extent. Certainly not. I see you giving me
30-year-old.
White Lamar Jackson, here he comes.
Oh my God. No, but as far as throwing the ball, Taysom Hill looks pretty good throwing the ball to me. But
yeah, he was all right throwing it, but he held it too long, and
that was less of an issue as he got further along in his starts. That first game was absolutely I was gnawing my teeth because he was holding the ball for so damn long.
Yeah, but ultimately though, I also think that the Saints personnel is designed for a more consistent pocket passer. I mean, you paid Alvin Kamara a significant amount of money, rightfully so. He's one of the best running backs in the league. But you paid him because he's a dual threat. And Jameis Winston, in his limited snaps after he replaced Drew Brees against the 49ers, showed that he could get the ball to Alvin Kamara. Taysom Hill didn't do that. So I think that they need a more consistent pocket passer. I don't think Taysom Hill is the guy long term. I think that he's better at where he is, being that Swiss Army knife type of guy.
I learned this week that Taysom Hill was named for Taysom Rotary Park in Pocatello, Idaho. So,
okay.
That's a great
Moving
fact.
on.
I'm sure I won't remember it.
Oh,
As
okay.
we're approaching the 2-hour mark, let's go ahead and get into these two games for the conference championships. On Sunday, the first game will be the NFC Championship between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Green Bay Packers. It'll be up at Lambeau Field in the cold. Eric and I both have 16 points on the Packers. Evan's got 8 on the Buccaneers. And before you go, whoa, 16 points? That's a whole lot of confidence put in them. We're going 16-8 this week. So, either one of these games, none of us really feel like we want to put 16 points on either of them, but you got to do it on one. This is where Eric and I put ours, but Evan, you're going lone wolf on the Buccaneers. So tell us why.
Both of my picks this week are some real home run swings to try to catch up. There's only 3 games left in the NFL season, so we're running out of chances to make a move here. So,
well, and you bring up you went lone wolf on both of these games. Eric and I are in agreement on both games. You've gone against us and with different confidence. So why don't I rephrase the question? Why are you more confident in the Chiefs beating the Bills than you are in the Buccaneers beating the Packers? Let's talk about it that way.
The Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes,
but he's not guaranteed to play.
I mean, we're taking some risks already, so I'm rolling some dice. I mean, the Chiefs are at home. Mahomes, I think he's probably going to play, but that remains to be seen. And it frankly surprised me that either of you picked the Bills. So, Chiefs all the way.
Okay. So we'll get to the Bills in a second, but let's get back to the Buccaneers and the Packers. What do you see that gives the Buccaneers an edge, in your opinion, over the Packers?
I mean, I think the Packers are the better team, but I still I guess I haven't really shaken that thought that the Packers can be had on defense, although their defense has played pretty well. Tom Brady smells blood in the water. He's not going to get this close and have it slip away just barely. Like, the Packers are going to have to annihilate the Buccaneers for Tom Brady to just go down. So this is Brady's 17th conference championship game or something like that.
14th.
Oh, okay. He's only 14.
Only 14.
I thought it was 14-2 in conference championship games. That doesn't make sense.
That wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, never mind. It's still a whole bunch. The point remains, Brady's been here before. It's going to be cold and snowy. That's not new for Tom Brady. Kind of cold and snowy in Foxborough, too. Not going to be a tremendous home field advantage considering, the pandemic. So I think Buccaneers in a squeaker to be the first team to play at home in the Super Bowl.
Well, it's still going to be a little bit of a home field advantage as far as the weather. I mean, that's the big thing there, and not so much necessarily on Tom Brady because you look back, going. I don't know if these stats are updated, but at some point in the recent past, Tom Brady was 8-3 on the road in the cold. So, and he's played his whole career in the cold, so he's used to that weather. I'm not worried about his performance too much this Sunday, but the rest of the team is not going to be used to that cold, and so that's going to factor in at least to some extent. The thing that to me gives the Packers a decisive edge, enough that I gave them more confidence points than I put on the other game, is that the Packers feel like a more complete package to me. Their defense is playing pretty well right now. Not fantastic, but it's playing pretty well. At least every bit as good as the Buccaneers' defense has been over the past several weeks, in my opinion. And I think that the Packers have more offensive weapons who are more consistent. They've got 2 really good running backs in Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Both of them are way better than than Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette. In the receiving game, I get that you've got guys like Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and they're good players, but Mike Evans does have a propensity to disappear sometimes. Like this, I get that this week was Lattimore, but that was not the only game, and it hasn't only been against Lattimore that he's disappeared. Godwin has had some games where he's disappeared. We don't know what's going to happen with Antonio Brown. He's dealing with an injury and might not be good to go this Sunday.
He's also Antonio Brown.
He's also Antonio Brown. The tight end situation is kind of volatile right now with Cameron Brate all of a sudden kind of taking over as the lead tight end over the past couple of weeks, and Rob Gronkowski not doing as much, even though this should be the time of the year that Rob Gronkowski has been saved up for. Maybe that doesn't seem to be the case. Whereas on the Packers side, you've got Aaron Rodgers playing as well as we've ever seen him play, throwing the ball to Devontae Adams, to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who has been really good lately. Allen Lazard has been solid lately. I don't see as many potential weaknesses. I'm definitely not trying to call the Buccaneers offense weak, because it's still a really good offense, but it's much more prone to having players disappear from one week to the next than the Packers offense is.
I don't disagree with any of that. I mean, I feel like we're, at this point in the season, I think we're in for a couple of really good games, and we have to split hairs and then put so much confidence on it. It sounds like we're completely diametrically opposed. And like, well, really, it's just, I have to put somebody's name on the line.
Yeah, it's a very fine line between who you pick here and who you don't. The thing is, I agree with you, Corey, that I would say the word I would use for the Buccaneers offense is inconsistent. I think that I don't think the Packers can do anything defensively that can really slow them down. I think it's more of, are the Bucs going to play well on offense today? Yeah. Like, there are teams in the NFL that can slow them down. We've seen the Saints do it. We saw the Rams do it. But the rest of the time, it's a matter of, okay, are the Bucs going to show up to play today? Or are they going to waste time like they did against the Falcons this year, or like they did at other certain times where it's like, oh, for the first half, we didn't show up, like against the Chargers. Well, that's not really going to work out too well if they have a game like that going against Green Bay, because they're not going to have, time to figure it out. Like, even in Week 6, when the Bucs blew the Packers out, the Packers were up 10-0 in that game, while the Buccaneers were sputtering on offense just because that's what they do. Like, it seems like they've got all these weapons and they still haven't quite mastered what to do with them. I think the coaching thing is a little bit of a mismatch here. I mean, Bruce Arians gets a lot of respect, but at this point, so far, Matt LaFleur has been a much better coach this year than he has. I don't think that's in question. But, if the Buccaneers can play a complete 60 on offense, I think they're going to win. But they haven't done that consistently, and this is going to be an environment where it's going to be extra hard to do that because of the weather, because you're on the road. I realize that the home field advantage is limited because you have a limited number of fans in there, but it's still hard to play in Lambeau Field. That's a really tough place to play in that environment. And you're asking a bunch of guys that play in a hot weather town to go in there and deal with that. And I think it's going to be a tougher adjustment. I don't think the Bucs defense is going to have the same level of success as they had the first go around. I think the Packers are a much more thorough offense at this point. I think that was kind of just a, burn the tape type of game where the Packers, things just got out of control real fast after one bad play and things went off the rails. That can happen to professional football teams. It's not unusual. It doesn't suddenly mean that the Packers are always going to have that result against the Bucs or even things that resemble that. So I think you're going to see a Packers offense is more in line with what we've seen from them throughout the season than that particular blip on the radar, which means I've got to favor the Packers because I think that they're more likely to show up and play a full 60, whereas the Bucs haven't been able to consistently do that. If the Bucs do that, then they probably win because I think they've got the more talented team.
Yeah,
I think it's worth pointing out that the Buccaneers this week, they have to get ready for this game, and they can see from their practice field, their home stadium, getting all dressed up to host a Super Bowl. Like, in case you needed, sometimes coaches go with visual aids and stuff. Like John Harbaugh used to he had a big sword that he brought into the locker room to make a point. In case you needed a visual aid, right? There's our goal right there. So let's go get it.
But part of that also worries me, though. I think sometimes getting caught up in we could host the Super Bowl and play in it at the same time. I don't know. It's never happened.
I think that might kind of take your focus off of the task at hand in a sense. And I mean, to Eric's point, talking about the regular season meeting between these two teams, we just saw what happened last week with the Bucks and the Saints. After the Saints beat the Bucks twice pretty handily, once an absolute drubbing in Week 9 when they beat them 38-3. So, one shellacking does not mean that you're going to get shellacked the next time. I had no problem picking the Buccaneers to win last week. And when they did, I've got no problem picking the Packers to win because I think that since then, they've been the better team. They've been more consistent, and the Bucs are a little more susceptible to losing this game. Thanks in part to the lack of experience that the team has outside of Tom Brady.
Yeah. So, if the Buccaneers bring their A game on offense, their offense could cancel out the Packers' offense. So that would bring us to the defensive side of the ball, and the Bucs' defense is clearly better in my mind than the Packers' defense.
Well, and
the Bucs could get like one stop, and they could win 45-42.
Well,
like that.
And another factor is Vita Vea is returning off of IR, and he was a huge part of their middle of their defense. I'm not sure if he's necessarily going to suit up, but it's something to keep an eye on. And plus, I think this could also potentially be the game where Dave Bakhtiari not being there could be a factor because the Bucs front seven is pretty ferocious, and so not having your All-Pro left tackle could make life harder for the Packers offense. There are opportunities for the Bucs to win this game, but we've also seen another team that was all jazzed up to host the Super Bowl and play in it, the Minnesota Vikings, and they got to go play the Eagles, who had lowly Nick Foles as their quarterback, and they were going to go in there, and they were favored to beat the Eagles, and they were going to go in there and beat their asses and come back home and host the Super Bowl at US Bank Stadium, and they got their pants pulled down. So,
well, they threw a pick six early, and, remember back in the old days when people could go to stadiums that were full? That Lincoln Financial Field was rocking after that, and that was all she wrote.
Yep.
Good night, Vikings. It's over.
Yeah. So Eric mentions Vita Vea potentially coming back, and I don't know that him being back this week in a limited capacity would necessarily be enough for me to switch my pick. But you're right. That definitely makes a difference because the defense clearly was worse after he got hurt. It clearly took a step back since then, and that's part of the reason why I think that over the last month or so, the Packers may actually have kind of caught up defensively. Their defense may be as good as the Buccaneers. I don't know if there's necessarily that gap. Vita Vea would potentially swing that a little bit. I just don't know by how much in his first game back.
Yeah, and I've picked the Packers, and I put max confidence on them as well. It's clearly not enough to make me swing my pick either. But we're talking about the game, so I figured it's an interesting point that's worth mentioning.
Absolutely. Moving on to the AFC Championship between the Bills and the Chiefs. Evan's already kind of given his reason for picking the Chiefs as, it's Patrick Mahomes. Eric and I both put 8 points on the Bills, and I don't know, for Eric what it is, but for me, in addition to the potential of Patrick Mahomes not playing, I'm in agreement with you, Evan. Mahomes is probably going to play. He practiced it in a limited capacity today, which would suggest that he's passed enough of the protocols that he's trending toward being ready by Sunday. Right, we've still got 3 more days before they have to activate him or not. So it looks like he's probably going to play, but there's that chance he won't. And quite honestly, I think the Bills have a chance to win whether he plays or not. Mahomes is much more prone to making mistakes lately. The Bills, to me, are clearly better than the Browns, and the Browns push the Chiefs down to the wire. I don't think that the Bills are going to beat the doors off the Chiefs or anything ludicrous like that. But I think that they probably win this game either way, and they definitely win if Patrick Mahomes can't play.
I'm inclined to agree with that. I think the Bills right now are a wagon, man. Like that's the best team in football going, and I would pick
the wagons.
I would pick them to beat anybody right now. I mean, they're a complete football team. Obviously, having Patrick Mahomes back there is decisive in whether or not they're going to win or lose.
You're saying he's better than Chad Henne?
Yeah, I think just a little bit.
Yeah, it's close, Yeah.
Just make that clear for our audience.
I mean, Chad Henne you played at Michigan, and that means nothing. So I think that the Chiefs have been underachieving dating back to the regular season. I think that even though Mahomes got hurt in that game, which is a big part of the reason why the Browns were able to make it really interesting, because they got a nice gift from Chad Henne on a puffball interception they threw when they were driving to be in field goal range. That's obviously not something you can expect from Mahomes. You're going to have to earn those turnovers. They're not going to be just straight up throw it up 500 style. But I think that Cleveland's not nearly as good defensively as the Bills are. I think that while the Browns offense had come on very strong, they had some injuries to deal with too. They lost a couple of linemen. They were dealing with some other injuries along their receiving core as well, which kind of inhibited their ability. They had some really bad luck with that fumble. Yeah, you got to hold on to the ball, but that's just an unfortunate play. That could have gone the other way easily and it just been fumbled outside of the pylon, or he could have just gotten in the end zone. It was a game of inches type of play. But I think that there's a little bit of vulnerability with the Chiefs because even if Mahomes plays, he's not 100%. He's dealing with a foot injury that had him hobbled throughout the first 2.5 quarters of that game. And if he's not able to be as – the best plays that Patrick Mahomes makes are out of the pocket. When he's on the run and he's got, Tyreek Hill, the fastest guy in the league, and Travis Kelce, the best receiving tight end in the league, running around in scramble drills, it's impossible to stop because Mahomes can throw off platform, backpedaling whenever. He can get the ball to the guy, and the guy will be open because he's the best in the world at what he does. So, but if that's limited and he has a harder time getting outside the pocket, a lot of those plays might turn into sacks. They might turn into throwaways. That offensive extra gear that the Chiefs have could be slowed, and we've already seen the offense be slowed quite a bit even before Mahomes had any injury issues. So I just think it's the Bills' time. I think they're going to win this game. They're going to head to their 5th Super Bowl, and knowing the Bills, they're going to lose that 5th Super Bowl because that's what they do is they lose Super Bowls. But I think they'll get by the Chiefs.
I think at least one of the Super Bowls they lost was in Tampa. So at the old Sombrero.
Although, wouldn't it be something, though, if the Bills, who have been absolutely tortured for decades, but specifically by one man, Tom Brady, and in order to basically this final boss battle style thing, if the Bills had to play the Bucs in the Super Bowl and beat Tom Brady, who beat he has more touchdown passes, or it might not be true anymore, but he used to have more touchdown passes than any Bills quarterback in Buffalo for 20 years. I mean, it's just like it was like the equivalent of Ben Roethlisberger in Cleveland. It's just complete ownership, and that's who you got to get by to get over the hump. It would be poetic to say the least.
See, the one thing I'm scared about for the Bills is if they win this game and then lose in the Super Bowl, how devastating would that be? Like that football commute, like that commute up in Buffalo, that is like, the mecca of football communities in America, in my opinion. Like there's not a better, more deserving football town and least deserving of being 0-4 in the Super Bowl. I would be heartbroken for them if they lost a 5th.
The jumping through the tables thing kind of wears on my nerves a little bit.
I love it. I hope they win. I hope they win because if they do, then Josh Allen's gonna jump through a table that's on fire.
Yeah, Bills Mafia, y'all do y'all's thing. I mean, if jumping through flaming tables is what you do, then go do it.
Right? Just make sure you have a fire extinguisher.
Wear a helmet or something.
They jump through tables and they yell at people that criticize their quarterback on Twitter. But they also donate to charity for every guy that they play. So, that's certainly the good absolutely outweighs the bad. And the bad really ain't that bad. It's just kind of hilarious. So,
didn't they throw a sex toy on the field one time?
Yes, they did throw a dildo on the field when they were playing the Patriots. But that was – I consider that harmless.
Yeah. I mean, do you. Y'all are having fun. I respect it. And it makes for some really hilarious ESPN graphics.
But I also, to answer your question, Corey, how devastated would they be if they lost another Super Bowl? It depends on how old you are. Like, if you're our age, you probably wouldn't really care because it's like you didn't really experience.
But the thing is, like, even if you have an experience, like you grow up around that, like that football community, like it's built around the team in a lot of ways. you know those stories.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but you haven't felt that emotionally, though.
I think in some ways you can kind of feel it through your parents. I mean, we feel some for Washington being from this area, Eric, you and I. We hear those stories and we think about how exciting it would have been back then. To have if we had been alive to watch the Gibbs era. You kind of feel that a little bit just passed down from our parents. And it feels that much worse to not actually have that be one of our experiences. I think that, Bills fans in our generation, though they may not have been alive and able to, comprehend and follow those 4 Super Bowl losses in a row, I think you still get some of that from your parents. And if it was to happen, all this time you've been thinking, man, I can't imagine feeling the devastation of that. I think that would kind of bring some of that into your feeling.
Yeah, but you also have to have some perspective that this is the beginning of something for Buffalo. It's certainly not the end game for them. They're going to be
the beginning of 4 more straight Super Bowl losses.
If you're a cynic, you might think that. If you're a more optimistic individual that says, hey, because let's be honest, like out of those 4 Super Bowls they lost, only one of them they had a chance. They were outclassed by Washington in '91. That was arguably the best football team ever. And they got whooped by a dynasty by the Cowboys twice. The only game they had a chance against was the Giants. And
wide right.
Yeah, wide right happened, and Bill Belichick became world famous because of that. So,
yep. So, that wraps it up for the topics we have to discuss for this week, I believe. Real quick before we move on to our closing of the show. For those of you who have been competing with us in our picks pool through the year, we thank you guys for joining us. We hope we get more people to join the competition next year for the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks. The way that we're going to do that is you're going to pick a winner and a margin of victory. And for every point that you are off on your margin of victory, that'll be taken away from a max of 16 points for that game down to a minimum of 1. So if you pick the winner with a margin of victory of 7 and the margin of victory ends up being 20, then you'll end up with 3 points, right? 16 minus the 13 difference between the 20 and your 7. So that's how that'll work. We'll explain that again in the next couple of shows just to make sure everybody's clear on how that'll work. Winner and margin of victory is how you'll pick for the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks.
There's only one show between now and the Super Bowl, isn't there? No, there's 2.
There's 2. There's one the week that would have been the Pro Bowl, and then there's the week leading into the Super Bowl.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind.
On to our shout-outs, if you guys have any. Mine, just a quick, shout-out to the Moylan family. Rest in peace to John Moylan, longtime principal at DeMatha Catholic High School. He was the football kickers coach for a long time. My dad grew up 2 doors down from the Moylan family. It's actually pretty much how I ended up at DeMatha. He passed away in the past week, and last year we lost another icon in Morgan Wooten, the Hall of Fame basketball coach. So 2 of DeMatha's most well-known figureheads have now passed away in the past 2 years. Morgan Wooten's death was actually a year ago, either today or tomorrow. So, very close to the anniversary there. But, rest in peace, John, and, keeping the family in our thoughts and prayers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember when I was at St. Hugh's and the local Catholic schools were coming to make their pitch to try to get us to come there. And DeMatha sent John Moylan to St. Hugh's, principal emeritus, to try to convince us 8th graders and 7th graders that we should go there. And he was such a character. I mean, he had such an energy to him. It was like the other people that came in there were kind of, from other schools were, kind of wet blankets, just like, well, we're this good at academics. Or this guy was having fun. He was having a good old time. He may have actually used a swear word, which is hilarious. Like mild swearing. He didn't drop an F-bomb or anything like that. But not something you would expect to hear in a Catholic middle school. But he definitely made an impact on me when he came through there, and I was like, wow, that guy really cares about his school. And of course, I ended up going to DeMatha, and it was the smartest decision I made. I had a good experience there. I met you guys there. I met some other friends there, and most people I know couldn't care less where they went to high school. I'm glad I can actually have some pride in where I went to school, and he's one of the biggest reasons why I ended up making that decision. So, rest in peace and much love to you.
Yeah, well, he was the first lay principal in the WCAC, so if he had been a clergyman, you probably wouldn't have heard any even soft swearing from him.
Well, some of the other people that came through, like the Gonzaga guy, was all like, "It's like, yeah, some of y'all aren't good enough to get in here." I'm like, "Screw you!"
Right,
jerk. And then there was another person from St. Anselm's, which is not a WCAC school, but she basically came in there and said, if you're good at sports, go to DeMatha. Like if you're just a guy who likes to play, but doesn't really think you're going to go anywhere, you can come here. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to DeMatha then, because at least I know their sports are good, even if I don't make the team.
Right. Any shout-outs for you, Evan?
Oh, I can't think of any. Eric, you reminded me of when I actually first met you, was when you were a shadow at DeMatha.
Yep.
You were like yourself now in miniature, like literally half the size.
I was not very big when I was in 8th grade. I'm not that big now, but certainly I don't think I hit 5 foot until I was like 14.
Yeah, I'm like, who is this little guy? Looks like Greg. Oh, it's Greg's brother. Now
you know.
Yeah.
This is in Derny's Spanish class.
Yes. Yeah,
All right.
I was sitting on the other side of the room, just trying to figure out what I was doing.
Well, if there aren't any other shout-outs, I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Sportsballers podcast. If you made it this far, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave us a like and a review on whatever podcasting service you follow us along on, those being Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts. We put our shows up on YouTube now, so if we are not on a service that you use, but you still manage to find us, let us know. We can always try and get ourselves onto that service as well. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at SportsBallers18. You can also follow us individually. I'm at Corey Puffett. Eric is at Quagmire67, and Evan is at Evan_Ash13. You can write into us with any sort of mailbag questions and what have you at thesportsballers@gmail.com. And be sure to like us on Facebook. We've been streaming our shows live on our Facebook page the last several weeks, and we plan to continue to do so. Feel free to join in the conversation and comments during those shows. We haven't gotten a whole lot of comments, but hopefully as time goes on, we'll get more and more viewership for those live shows and maybe get a little bit of interaction from our audience.
This is only the 127th episode, so the viewership has been, I guess, creeping up slowly.
Slowly but steadily. So, for Evan and for Eric, this has been episode 127 of the Sports Ballers podcast. I'm Corey Puffett. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you guys again after the conference championship games a week from today.